Hey, Jeff Ronnie here at the Boaphile channel. Today I'm going to talk about something a little different, something scientific called parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis is reproduction by a female without any contribution from a male, without any genetic contribution from a male. So let me give you a little history on when I first learned about parthenogenesis. So this is back in 1994 or something like that, maybe 93, when the original Jurassic Park movie came out. For many of you, it was not first run when you saw it. I saw it at the theater when it first came out. Many of you weren't even born, but it was a big deal. I mean, the technology was something cutting edge. It was really amazing to watch and emotional, really, for a kind of a wannabe scientific kid or scientist kid. Really interested in animals, watching those first scenes where you see the dinosaur walk out and you can feel the emotion that the scientists must have felt, the characters in the movie must have felt when they saw that first brontosaurus, brachiosaurus, whatever that was, walk out. So it was a pretty moving movie. And at the beginning of the movie, Jeff Goldblum is in the lab with the old man who figured all this stuff out and how to duplicate the DNA and make these dinosaurs. He makes a comment that nature will find a way.
It's that life will not be contained. Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but, well, there it is. There it is.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
Which is referring to there are multiple ways of reproducing in nature that animals utilize. One of those ways is parthenogenesis. Another way is some species are able to actually change their sex. So there's some frogs in the presence of too many females and no males or not enough males. Some of the females are actually able to change their sex so that they're able to breed the females and fertilize the eggs. So that's not parthenogenesis. I'm not sure what that's called, but that's one other mode of reproduction. What we're talking about is parthenogenesis. So at the end of the movie, this is to tell a story of how I found out about parthenogenesis. At the end of the movie, Sam Neill, who plays one of the paleontologists that is really impressed with seeing these new dinosaurs, which of course had to be the equivalent of 60, 80, maybe 100 years old in order to achieve the gigantic size that they had in the movie. Of course, they don't explain how that happened. It's one of those things that kind of drives me nuts about movies that doesn't make sense. But at the end of the movie, he's walking in the woods with a couple of kids who are in the movie, and he stumbles upon some dinosaur eggs. The scientist, the old man that had developed all these dinosaurs, specifically did it by creating only female dinosaurs so that they wouldn't be reproducing without him being in complete control of it. So they're all supposed to be females.
Actually, they can't breed in the wild. Population control is one of our security precautions. There's no unauthorized breeding in Jurassic Park.
And how do you know they can't breed?
Well, because all the animals in Jurassic Park are female. We've engineered them that way.
Well, he finds some eggs, the Sam Neill character, and the eggs have hatched. And he's dumbstruck that there are eggs that have hatched. How does this happen? And he makes the comment, oh, and you see all the little eggs and little footprints leading away from the eggs, showing you that they're little baby dinosaurs that took off. And the eggs, of course, are just sitting right on the ground. They're not buried like most species of reptiles do with their eggs. There are a few that will lay them right on the surface, but none of your more advanced reptiles do. And he makes the comment that life will find a way.
Environment. Malcolm was right. Look. Life found a way.
So at work, where I worked at a cabinet shop, I worked with a guy, his name was Brian Wolf. He was a PhD student at the time, majoring in environmental biology. And he taught a lesson, basically, to all of us cabinet makers who weren't scientists. He is a scientist, but we weren't. And he explained parthenogenesis, and that's what they were referring or inferring in the movie by those eggs. So that's how I found out about parthenogenesis. So fast forward to about 2007, and Sharon Moore, the breeder who originated the Boa woman caramel animals, bred a Boa woman caramel, which at the time she was just calling light phase. I believe Big Mike coined the term Boa woman caramel for her. Big Mike, basically Boa's fame. Big Mike Weissman. Pretty sure that that's true, but that's not what the story's about. So Sharon Moore was one of the early boa breeders, bred them for the first time in the 80s, same as me. And she had bred this Boa woman caramel to a het sharp male in an attempt to make paradigm boas. Again, back to Big Mike. Big Mike had stumbled onto the paradigm boa phenomena. The fact that if you had a double het Boa woman caramel and a double het Boa woman caramel sharp, I should say, that would create a paradigm or a different looking phenotype. Basically looked like what we would call a T positive. That's what she was trying to make. Well, she made a whole mess of babies that to her looked just like Boa woman caramels. She didn't make any normals. She should have made half a litter of normals, half a litter of paradigms. So she called me to ask me what I thought could be going on. And I thought about this parthenogenesis possibility. I hadn't heard of it in Boa Constrictors before, but thought about it. So I told her, call Warren Booth. And I either sent his phone number or his email address. Warren Booth was, I believe he was a PhD student at the time. Hadn't done his thesis, although I could be wrong about that, but he got the information from her and probably shed skins from all of those babies, and also got a baby from her, one of those what I started calling parthos a long time ago. So a parthenogenic reproduced baby from Sharon Moore, and ultimately got babies from her again from a second litter, a total of 22 babies, which he was able to prove were produced via parthenogenesis. That is, produced by the female alone without any contribution from the male. So, which is amazing. It's fascinating. And I've had that happen many times. I had a double het sharp snow, which is an animal that was het for sharp and het for anarthristic, which I bred to, I believe it was a jungle that wasn't het for anything. This is probably 10 years ago. And I got a small litter, but within the litter, there were several sharp snows, which isn't possible. As far as I knew, the jungle was not het sharp or het anarthristic, yet there were sharp snows. The sharp snows were all females, which is a typical result. Not always, but typically parthenogenic reproduced babies are all females. The Sharon Moore Partho babies were all females. These sharp snows that I produced were females, and they didn't do well. They lived for maybe 2 weeks. I don't think they even shed before they died. Additionally, in 2011, I bred a Key West to a VPIT positive in the attempt to make Key West's het VPI. And I got quite a few Key West het VPI and a bunch of normals het VPI. But there were two VPIs in the litter? Well, those were Parthos. Those were produced via parthenogenesis. At that time, we didn't know as much as we know about it now. They were females, too, of course. Those two didn't live. They looked fine when they were born, but they didn't live. And I've had quite a few times, probably 20 times, so I've been breeding a lot of boas for a long time. And most recently, in the last 10, 12 years, usually my breedings include at least one gene. And when you produce a Partho, the thing that makes a Partho or a baby produced via parthenogenesis unique is the difference in how they're created or how they begin compared to a sexually reproduced offspring. So in sexual reproduction, the female boa constrictor produces an ova or an ovum, and within that ova, there is an egg, and that contains half of the genetic material required for a healthy baby. The other half of the genetic material comes from the male in the form of sperm, and the sperm contains the genetic material that mates up with the genetic material in the egg, and you have a complete genome for an individual baby. So half of that information comes from the egg, which is produced by the mom. Half of that information comes from a sperm, which is produced from the male. In the case of a parthenogenic baby, the DNA comes from the egg, which the mom produces. Now let me address one misconception that a lot of people have. A parthenogenic produced baby, or a partho, or a baby produced via parthenogenesis, is not a clone of the mom. Never. It is not a clone of the mom. So each egg has its own unique DNA. One copy of all the DNA, it takes two copies to make a full, complete unit. So one copy of all of the DNA within that offspring comes from mom. In the case of a parthenogenic baby, for some reason, we don't know why, that egg begins to divide, and that DNA ends up making a copy of itself. So both halves of the required two to make a complete genome of an individual baby, or genome might not be the right term, but a complete set of all of the genes for one baby are all identical at every point all along the DNA. Well, this is really, it's not inbreeding, but it is the ultimate disaster, and similar to what goes on when there is inbreeding. So the reason why you don't inbreed is because you want more diversity of the DNA. So if you breed a female with her, say her son, they're going to share a lot of DNA because he got all of his DNA from mom. So they're going to share a lot of DNA, and you breed them, take that shortcut, which maybe you have to make a simple recessive if it's the first generation and no one else has made them before. But in most cases, you don't have to. But the inbreeding results in a less healthy, less robust offspring. So you just imagine when you have an offspring that is 100% common for everything all along the DNA. It's a very unhealthy animal. So in boa constrictors, it's almost always a death sentence. I've made a lot of babies via parthenogenesis, not on purpose. But I've made a lot of babies via parthenogenesis, and almost all of them die within about 2 weeks. Occasionally some will live longer, but in the case with mine, I've only had a couple that have lived for a period of years. Maybe 5 that have lived for a period of years. I have not been able to breed any of them, probably just due to the fact that they're really unhealthy and completely 100% homozygous for every single trait all along the DNA. Warren Booth obtained one of those babies from Sharon Moore, produced via parthenogenesis. He actually bred it. It's the only time I know of anyone breeding a boa constrictor that was produced via parthenogenesis. So it can be done. It's possible, but it's not easy. It's very, very difficult. So that's pretty much all there is to know about parthenogenesis. We don't know why it happens. Oh, one other interesting thing. You can get a litter where everything in the litter is produced via parthenogenesis. About 10 years ago, I bred a labyrinth boa, the original male import from Colombia, to a ghost. And she produced nothing but ghosts and anerythristics. An enormous litter. Fantastic litter. They were crazy beautiful. But ultimately, they all died pretty soon after being born because they were produced via parthenogenesis. That was a pretty disappointing litter. Sometimes, like the litter where I bred a Key West to a VPI, you'll just get a couple. And Parthos are almost always females, which I think I mentioned, but it bears repeating. They're almost always females. They didn't do well. And then coincidentally, 2 or 3 days ago, I had a litter from an Aztec, a Sunglow Sharp Aztec, which I bred to a Hypo Labyrinth Het Sharp. I came upon her having her babies. The first one was out. And I just watched, and there was female, or it was albino after albino after albino. I was worried that it was going to be a Partho litter because I didn't get any normals, and I should get about half of the babies should have been normals, breeding a visual sharp to a het sharp, but I didn't get any normals. So ultimately, when I got the babies out of there, there were several stillborns, quite a few slugs, a number of deformed babies. Then there were a handful of live babies, and several sharp super Aztecs. So those were Parthos. So basically when you produce a Partho, if the female is het for anything, the Partho babies, which also carry the simple recessive gene, or in this case sharp, will be visual sharp because they're homozygous for sharp. They're homozygous for everything. So the same thing would go for hypo or jungle, which are incomplete dominant. You would get super hypos, which wouldn't be detrimental, but you'd get super jungles, which are bad. And in this case, I got one baby that was produced sexually, which is pretty unusual for me. Usually it's just a couple of Parthos. But this litter had a bunch of Parthos. There was one Sunglow. That was probably fine. But it may have been a Partho too. It actually has died since then, so it probably was a Partho. But I did get one sharp Sunglow Aztec. It would be impossible to get an Aztec any way other than sexual reproduction. Because again, a Partho would be homozygous for every single characteristic. So that was produced sexually. So this male did not make a labby, but he did make one sharp Sunglow Aztec. So I'm happy I got one baby out of it. Another thing that bears mentioning is Parthos are particularly common with motleys. And we don't know why that is, but it happens a lot. When you breed motleys, and you have a female motley, and you end up with super motleys. That, of course, we all know is pretty much the death knell. But super motleys don't do well, but it's very, very common in motley breedings. And that can just be one or two motleys that come out super motleys. I don't think we didn't know it was parthenogenesis when that first happened. We didn't understand why it happened. But now we know. It's parthenogenesis. It's very bad because to be homozygous for motley is very bad. And then those motleys, of course, are homozygous for everything. So that none of that is beneficial for them. So parthenogenesis, in the case of boa constrictors, is not life-finding way. It's bad. It doesn't work out. Doesn't work out well for the animals. So, at any rate, hopefully you learned something. I'm going to actually show a short clip of a video I shot of that litter the other day, showing the super Aztec sharps and the one good sharp Sunglow Aztec that came from the litter, with me talking about it just a little bit. So that'll follow this discussion immediately after. So this is a litter that illustrates how parthenogenesis can exhibit itself. I'm not sure what the result can be with parthenogenesis at times. So there are 3 parthenogenic animals here or 3 babies that were produced via parthenogenesis. And that is this one, and this one. These are all sharp albinos. They're all super Aztecs. So the mother is a sharp sunglow Aztec. So the only way to get a super Aztec from that is if the female produces some babies, or could be all of them in some cases, via parthenogenesis. So this is a super Aztec. This is a super Aztec. And so is this one. So they have the classic super Aztec tendency of having a squirrely head. They don't know which way is up. See, he has no sense of balance. He tries to move around. It's bad. And this is another Aztec sunglow. So we got Aztec from the mom, but only a single copy of it, because it's not a super. And hypo from mom. So this one was produced sexually. That is, the hypo labyrinth, het sharp, that bred her produced this. But these were produced with no help from the father. Just via parthenogenesis, which we explain in detail. This is to show you what can happen. I've been planning on doing this video on parthenogenesis, and then today I had this pretty disappointing litter where every one of them came out albino, and I started to be concerned because I knew that only half of them should be. And this is what we have. Not a great result, but a good teaching moment, I guess.
Very good. God. Push. Come on. Come on. Come on, then. There you are. There you are. The imprint on the first creature they come in contact with. That's it. Helps them to trust me. I've been present for the birth of every little creature on this island.
Surely not the ones that are bred in the wilds.
And I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something from it. Subscribe. Hit that like button. Pretty please. Hit it. Hit it. Go ahead. And hit that bell so you get notifications every time I upload a new video. Hey, thank you much for watching. Have a good one.